And joining us now on the River Islands guest line is none other than Keith Law, senior baseball writer for The Athletic. Keith, good morning to you. Joe Spadoni alongside Joe Shasky. Let's dive right into it. The biggest topic, the last 48 hours here in San Francisco. What was your reaction, Keith, when you saw Rafael Devers waving off Jonah Cox, the first base coach, Jace Tingler, the bench coach, and obviously one Tony Vitello? And good morning to you.
Yeah, good morning. It's, first of all, I think it kind of underscores everything that, Alex Cora and the Red Sox folks had said or implied about Devers while he was there. I do think it adds to the sense that we had last week from those bigoted Giants players putting the Bible verse on their cap to, what I would call a highly performative display of their religion. Adds to the sense that Tony Vitello has no control over this team at this point. And this isn't hugely surprising, right? He was an extremely successful Division I coach. No qualms whatsoever, no concerns whatsoever, no criticism of what he did in college. But college and the majors, college and the pros are two entirely different things. And I think the Giants being out of the box in terms of hiring Vitello was questionable at the time because we really just didn't know what was going to happen. And now with the benefit of 2.5 months of just watching this play out, and it's the benefit of hindsight too, I think they made a mistake and they have to try to figure out a path out of this, which to me involves giving consequences to Devers for showing up the entire coaching staff. Ultimately, I don't care who you are, how much money you make, you are an employee of the team, you report up to the coach, not the other way around, and showing up, and your teammates, you embarrassed Jonah Cox, who did absolutely nothing wrong. There have to be consequences for Devers, both for the team, but also to try to give Vitello some measure of authority over the roster.
Was the bigger mistake trading for Devers, or was the bigger mistake going in the direction of Vitello?
Oh, Vitello, for far and away. And it's you can really split a lot of the decisions that have happened over the year and a half since Posey took over. There are the Posey decisions, and then there are the baseball ops decisions. And when the baseball ops folks seem to be taking charge, you're seeing pretty good decisions. If you talk to people who spend a lot of time watching the Giants farm system, you're hearing great things about what's going on in player development. They're modernizing a lot of things. They're trying more things. There's a lot more willingness to experiment on the player development side to try to modernize. That stuff's going great. And I think their farm system is on the way up. And then there's the Posey decisions when Buster has no front office experience whatsoever. He's a great player, but that doesn't make you a great manager, coach, scout, and certainly not executive. When he gets involved, the process isn't good. It's not even just that the outcomes aren't good, but that the process isn't good. And the process that was used to hire Tony Vitello seems to be Buster liked what he saw from him and said, okay, this guy would make a good major league manager, rather than considering, to me, the value of experience more than anything else. That could be minor league experience rather than major league experience. But the college game, it's just extremely different. You have guys they're obviously all much younger. They depend on you for their scholarships or to keep their NIL money. Yes, they can transfer out. Obviously, they have more agency than they used to. It's just a very different dynamic than managing a roster of 26 guys, some of whom are making $30 million a year.
So you referenced some sort of disciplinary action with Rafael Devers. I've never seen anything like this, especially at the professional level. Seen it in daddy ball, as I call it, when you're doing travel ball and you see a kid try to show up one of the dads, or their own dad. What is an appropriate punishment? And I guess the follow-up to that is how do you punish a guy on an 8-year deal who's making hundreds of millions of dollars? And even if he doesn't think he was wrong.
You bench him. This is the first thing you do, right? He shouldn't play again for at least several days with the expectation that he is going to make things right. You want to get back in the lineup. And I understand he might say, I'm fine just going on the bench and collecting my check. But you have to do this both as a way to, it's like behavior management, like you would with a toddler, right? You can't smear your spaghetti up against the wall on the wall. I'm sorry. You can't, I understand you think it's art, but you can't do that. And there has to be some kind of consequence so he doesn't keep doing this. So, but also so other players don't decide, they're not going to necessarily deny being pulled for a pinch runner, but you do not want other players on the team similarly showing up the coaching staff or embarrassing. Cox he's a rookie. I feel bad for him because he had nothing to do with any of this. He was just doing what he was told, right? And suddenly he's in the middle of a controversy that is even remotely of his own making. And Devers needs to be accountable for his actions to the coaching staff, to Cox specifically, and to the rest of the roster.
Keith, it was like a scene out of Major League 2 where Roger Dorn gets hit and then refuses to come off the base. And he's like, stretching at first. Like, it's the first thing I thought of. Did your phone just start ringing with people going, here we go? Like, was there, I guess, confirmation bias after it happened from the people that you know industry-wide regarding the Giants situation? Maybe not just Devers in particular, but just everything going on with the Giants.
Nothing about the Devers thing, but of course, right, I cover prospects. So, I'm less likely to get that stuff on a major league situation. Like if something like that had happened in Double-A with a prospect, way more likely I would have heard about it. I did hear a lot more from folks in the industry about those 4 homophobic players on the Giants making a spectacle of themselves, which to me also comes down to Vitello. Vitello even choosing to put them in the game. Like, what, you didn't see? They wrote that bogus rainbow thing on their hats, which I keep coming back to. Like, rainbows are not real, folks. Rainbows are optical illusions. Like, do you think there's a pot of gold at the end of that? Because I promise you, there's definitely not one. But again, Vitello choosing to put those guys in the game on Pride Night, that is a choice. He could have seen what was on the hats and said, fine, I'm just not going to use you. You got a bunch of other relievers out there. So, yeah, I'm very opposed to what the players did, in addition to the fact they just violated the uniform rules, which is pretty obvious reason for them to get a scolding. But ultimately, ultimately, Vitello chose to put them in the game. What are you doing? You know exactly what's going to happen. You understand. You cannot possibly, as Vitello, speaking to Vitello, you cannot possibly put those guys in the game and think there's not going to be any repercussions from this. It makes him look, again, like he is not in control of his own team, of his own roster, of his own players. And you're the guy at the top of that chain. Yes, I understand there are people above him in the front office. When it comes to the dugout in the clubhouse, you're the top guy. You should be showing, it's better decision making, but you need to be the one in charge. And right now it's like romper room. It looks like he's not in charge. Maybe that's not really what it's like in that clubhouse, but that's what it looks like from the outside. And he needs to take steps with the help of the front office to reclaim that authority. Because I'm assuming he's not going anywhere anytime soon. There's a lot of money left on that deal. So they need to start taking reparative steps to reestablish his authority as the manager of this team.
No, it feels like the perception is slowly becoming a reality, especially for the Giants fans. And Keith Law joining us here on the Morning Roast, senior baseball writer for The Athletic. What do you think the logic was? We're going back in time now. We were playing some of the introductory presser sound from Devers and Posey and, Greg Johnson and everything. What do you think the logic was moving off of Bob Melvin for Tony Vitello? Like, what were they thinking, was the big jumping off point from a guy like Bob, who's, baseball lifer, it feels like, as a manager. He's had multiple stops. He's been manager of the year a couple times, whether it's with the Padres, the A's. He had some good years, obviously, and going with an unproven guy and young hotshot Tony Vitello.
I think the sense was they wanted a change. They wanted something new. They wanted a new thinker, new philosophy. I hadn't really heard a lot against Melvin, maybe just that he was a little more set in his ways. But he's had a fair bit of success at multiple stops also. So I never heard anything to indicate to me that the Giants thought he was a bad manager, especially in terms of managing the people on the team, right? Which is obviously the main focus right now in anybody talking about Vitello. But I think a lot of this was instead about, let's do something new. Let's try something new. They're in a very difficult division. The Dodgers are a juggernaut. And so I respect the belief that we need to try to be bold. We need to try bigger things, bigger swings to have more of an impact because you've just always got a tougher hill to climb. That said, Vitello was, again, it was questionable process, right? Did they really look at the resume? Did they really know what it was going to be like to have a guy who's only managed amateur players before now to come in and manage big leaguers, not just professionals. Like if Vitello said, I want to go manage in AA for 2 years to get some experience in the professional environment, that would have been great. Obviously, it's not right for him financially, but that to me is a pretty important interim step before managing big league players. And again, I respect the willingness to take a big shot, but I don't think the process here was good. And ultimately, that's why they're in this situation, why this is overshadowing the actual baseball too, which, okay, probably they don't want to talk about that either.
No, they're terrible. I wrote a list of everything that's happened this year.
No, seriously, Keith, real quick. Shasky went through the 40 lowlights of the season right now, and it started before the season even began.
Yeah, it started before the season began. So, okay, if they came to you, they said, Keith, what should we do? You know, Rafi, Tony, Buster, you know, what would your solution be?
Like I said, they have to take immediate steps to reestablish that Vitello is the manager of this club or fire him. That's it. You have two choices, right? I'm assuming they're not going to fire him. So there has to be some kind of consequence for Devers for showing up the team. Frankly, I think there need to be consequences for those 4 pitchers for showing up the team also. They created this controversy. They chose a performative act that overshadowed the rest of the team. Vitello needs to take charge. That's going to require the front office also having his back. It may also mean he needs to have someone else on his staff who's a more experienced manager or has more experience on a big league bench to try to help guide him in some of these situations, because it's just, you're managing a different type. You're managing older people who make a lot more money and don't need you and probably look at you, right? Rafael Devers says, I got an 8-year deal. Tony, you only got a 3-year deal and you're on a nice edge right now. He's like, I can outlast you. That's true, but you really don't want that dynamic in the clubhouse. So I think there are a lot of steps they need to take to try to repair the situation, to make it clear. Either make it clear Tony Vitello is our manager, he will be our manager, and you need to respect his authority, or they need to move on from him. All
right, so if you had to guess today, what's the most likely? Rafi gone, Tony gone, or they're both gone?
I think Tony goes before Rafi, because it's not like they're going to be able to move him. And I really doubt they're going to release him, because he's also not worthless as a player, right? This is not a guy who's a clubhouse problem and also a terrible player. He's just not worth what he's being paid. I don't think he's going anywhere. I also would be shocked if they moved on from Tony before at least this offseason. Given the fanfare, the amount of investment, the financial investment, and sort of the psychological investment in this, I do not think they're going to just move on from him. My slightly cynical answer, though, is that they don't do anything with Devers, with those 4 pitchers, that they just try to let it blow over rather than taking affirmative, definitive steps to try to repair this situation, which is, okay, granted, I've never been a GM, so I'm speaking a bit out of school here, and I've never managed people, right? This is one of the most difficult parts of both of those jobs. But they need to do something to try to reestablish the order of things in the clubhouse and in front office vis-a-vis the clubhouse.
If it was up to you and Greg Johnson, who's kind of like the head of the Giants ownership, said, hey,
yes,
you know, Buster wants to move on from this manager, would you advise that he's allowed to hire another person? Or would you would you tell Greg Johnson to get Buster someone else to make that decision on manager?
So it's a sunk cost, right? Vitello's paid what he's paid. So the decision to keep Vitello should be, do we think we're better off with him or without him? And if they've made the decision, for whatever reason, we want to move on from him, then I'd say yes. I would say let baseball ops hire the next manager. Let Zach Managian and his group actually make the hire. But this is the problem, is Buster is the guy who just sort of parachuted in and is saying, do this, do this, do this, do this. No, you have an entire staff of really talented, really smart people from Managian on down who can do this. And hiring the manager is a pretty important thing for a GM and a front office to do. Let them do this with a real process. And the other thing I would say too is that is something you want to do in the offseason, because there are a lot more candidates available in October than there are right now. Right now, what they'd end up doing is just hiring an interim manager, and maybe they'd get a good one, but your pool is nowhere near as large as it would be once the minor league season has ended and you start to get far more names available, guys whose contracts are up or guys who are available. At least the teams will give permission for them to make a move to another organization.
Keith Law joining us here on the River Islands guest line, senior baseball writer for The Athletic. It hasn't all been bad, Keith. There is some hope. This guy, Bryce Eldridge, all right? Giants fans are starting to get excited. Should they continue to be excited about this guy? Batting .298, got 6 home runs. I'm sure you saw the walk-off grand slam he had when the team came back 9-1. Like, it's been incredible there. So, like, that is the hope for this fan base right now. Should they continue to have hope in this guy is my question.
Oh, absolutely. I tell you, the biggest thing, I guess the performance is great. It was really great. But, I mean, this guy was rushed to AAA. He's been pushed to levels and situations that he probably wasn't really ready for in terms of experience or the year they had him play. I think it was the same year they pushed him to AAA. And then, hey, go to fall league too. Like, you're not an exhausted 19-year-old. And what we saw from him over really the last 2 years or so, certainly since he reached AA, is this guy's been having trouble making contact. And so far in the majors, that's been much improved over what we've seen from him in his previous time in the majors or when he was in the high minors. And that gives me the most cause for optimism going forward, because we knew he had power. We knew he was going to hit the ball hard. And so if he puts the ball in play more, it's going to mean higher batting average, higher slugging percentage. You just got to get the bat to the ball. And so far, in a modest sample, he's doing far better at that than he really has, I guess, without looking at his actual stats, I think probably since he was in high A, which is a really positive sign. And again, credit to Kyle Haynes and the player development department for helping him after he was rushed so badly that first full season in the minors.